Oh, what is up, everybody? We are here a little bit earlier than usual. This is the Driver Show DFS for Doe video and podcast for the Baycurrent Classic this week. And as you can tell, Justin Van Zuden isn't with me this week. We have a special fill-in, Kyle Murray. What's going on, man? How is everything? And how's prepping for NBA right now?
Yeah, it's been good. We were talking a little bit before we went live. NBA moved up their typical opening night, like at least a week and a half or so. So that's been a new thing for the schedule. But it's been good. I will say from a golf perspective, a little bit of a Ryder Cup hangover going on for me, obviously with football going on as well. But new course, new tournament to talk about this week. So excited to talk about the tour getting back to Japan.
Yeah, it should be fun. It's a new event, new course, so a lot of unknowns, which kind of leads you to embrace the variance a little bit more than usual. It's also a no-cut event, but before we break down the field, let's quickly talk about last week's event. I honestly didn't watch a ton on the weekend. How did your lineups fare? Did you have any key takeaways from the Sanderson Farms Championship?
Yeah, I think we saw a few, I guess, big-ish names for that tournament kind of falter towards the the back end of Friday and Saturday. So that was an interesting play out. I didn't really get too much action down for DFS perspective. I had a couple of top 20 bets and whatnot, but it was mostly an uneventful week for me. But I will say for that sort of field where not a ton of big names. Normally, I love those kinds of events, and I have a lot of success in those sorts of weeks, but no big luck last week, so hopefully that can carry over to the Baycurrent this week.
Yeah, I felt real good about my lineups before lock, and quickly those hopes were dashed. So much of the chalk ended up struggling. I think the 6 of 6 was 1 or 2% last week, which is one of the lowest that we've seen in quite some time. And 5 of 6 was less than 10%. So if you had 5 of 6 or 6 of 6, you're probably looking pretty good heading into the weekend. Yeah, Stephen Fisk gets the job done. He's a guy that's been popping in my model for quite some time. Haven't played him a ton, but ends up getting it done with the 8 under round on Sunday. Beat out Garrick Higo, Rasmus Højgaard. Like you mentioned, some of the other big names near the top of the leaderboard kind of fell apart on the weekend. Anything else, or should we move on?
No, I think that you mentioned Higo, so that the play where they both had their ball in the bunker. I don't know if you saw that, and their balls were literally stacked on top of each other. That was one of the more insane things that I saw last week. I think I just saw that one on Twitter, so that was funny. But that was the biggest takeaway I had from last week. I thought that was one of the funnier things I've seen on the golf course.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. Once my lineups were dead, I didn't even worry about Showdown on the weekend. Sweat some NFL lineups, so yeah, I'll have to check that out. All right, let's talk about the Baycurrent Classic. So you mentioned it's going to be in Japan. So it's going to be locking pretty early on Wednesday night. If you are building lineups, make sure to get those in before Wednesday evening because lineup locks a lot earlier than usual. The course is the Yokohama Country Club. It's going to be in Japan. Par 71, 7,315 yards. This is a unique par 71 in that there's 2 par 5s and 3 par 3s. So that means there are 13 par 4s. Now, if you look at a regular golf course, par 72s usually have 10 par 4s, par 71s usually have 11. So obviously this is more par 4s on this course than any other course on the PGA Tour rotation. So I do think par 4 scoring is going to be an interesting metric to target this week. We don't really know how the course is going to play. They have held 3 different professional tournaments here in the past. The winning scores of those events were 13, 14, and 20 under par, I believe. So given the fact that these are PGA Tour players, I think we're going to see at least 20 under par. Probably, I don't know. We'll see. The course itself, it's kind of a mix of 2 different courses. So you have the West course and the East course. It sounds like the West course has 16 of the holes, and it's a little bit easier off the tee, so a little bit wider fairways, pretty deep bunkering. The course features zoysia grass in the rough and in the fairway. So typically when you have zoysia grass, it's really good lies in the fairway. It kind of tees your ball up a little bit. But the rough, it's really hard to hit out of. So you definitely want golfers that are going to keep it in the fairway. Kind of looking at bogey avoidance, but again, we don't really have a strong course fit this week. I will note that 8 of the par 4s are less than 440 yards. So I do think a lot of wedges are going to be hit this week. And since there's only 2 par 5s, I'm not sure I'm looking too much at distance. I don't know. What are you looking at for the course? Anything else you want to add? And what are some of the key metrics you're looking at this week?
Yeah, obviously, tough course, I guess, with no real data. When we are looking at the model data that we have in our RotoGrinders model for some of these hole by hole stuff, it looks like 9 of the holes have played. Again, you mentioned very limited sample size, but it's the data that we have to work with. So I figured I would bring it up. 9 holes playing as either low or very low in terms of scoring. And then you have, I think, 4 or 5 holes that are either high or very high. So for me, it's going to kind of come down to how these guys score on these low holes. They have to obviously take advantage of these, lower under par on average holes on those 8 to 9 holes throughout the course, and then obviously not get torn up by the more difficult ones. But I just think overall scoring is going to, really tend to gravitate towards those more difficult holes where guys who are not getting beat up by those ones are able to take advantage of the easier holes. So for me, obviously, ball striking every single week is going to be crucial here, and especially on a course with this limited data. I like to lean on those guys who I can certainly rely on from a ball striking off the tee accuracy and approach perspective. So no real surprise for me that it's going to be me leaning on guys who are going to be able to hit lots of greens and fairways. But I do think that like you mentioned, the par 4 scoring is certainly an intriguing angle because there's that extra par 4 hole on this course. So I guess that would be like my main takeaways for the course.
Yeah, a couple other notes. This is a no-cut event, so targeting birdie or better percentage does make some sense. There's going to be a lot of guys that outscore their finishing position, just guys that make a lot of birdies. And then anything else from a roster construction standpoint? Are you more likely to leave some salary on the table since you don't have to worry about a cut? And there's going to be extra chalk since there are fewer golfers in the field. There's 78 this week, so I don't mind pivoting away from some of the chalkier value plays, but any other roster construction angles you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think you made a great point with some of the cheaper chalk plays, just because again, no cut, so you can have a guy who finish lower on the scoreboard, but just make more birdies than some of these chalk guys and outscore them from a DFS perspective. I think there are a couple different ways to build lineups this week, just because we don't have like a guy like Scotty at the top end, the very top end of pricing. We do have Xander here at 11K on DraftKings, but I think you can actually typically on these no cut events, I like to get a little bit more, I guess top heavy with the pricing. But there are a few guys in this range I think make some really solid, I guess balance builds for these 9 to 9.5K guys. So looking at that sort of build as well this week quite a bit.
All right, let's get into it. Probably shouldn't take us too long to get through the field. As always, we go through each pricing tier, talk about our favorite plays, potential fades. Let's start at the very top. There are 3 golfers above 10K this week. You have Xander Schauffele, Hideki Matsuyama, Colin Morikawa. Who's your favorite, and are you prioritizing them in your lineups?
Yeah, so I guess, and I just talked about Xander a bit. In terms of the ownership, we have him right there at the top with another guy who we'll talk about in the 9Ks, Kurt Kitayama. I think both of those guys will walk away as some of the most popular. I think there's really no problem playing Xander. I think my personal favorite would be just a way just to get a little bit different and play Hideki. I do think that once we get to lineup block, we'll see a little bit more of separation in ownership with Xander getting a little bit more popular than Hideki. So I do prefer Hideki slightly in this spot. We've seen Xander kind of turn it up a little bit towards the end of the year, but still we've seen some of those concerns with his putting has not been as good, later on in that 2024 season. And then obviously even in the middle, which that's something that he was relying on so heavily through that, elite stretch in 2023. Hideki, you can make the same sort of argument for, but just a little bit better of an approach player. So I think for me, it's going to come down to ownership. If these two stay neck and neck, I'll just lean on Xander. But if I'm right and we do get a little bit more of a separation with the field going towards Xander more, just being able to play him with all the value out there, and Hideki falls to 5-10% less than Xander, I might take a little bit of a pivot there. But for the most part, if they stay even, I have no problem leaning on Xander. I would rank those 3, I guess, Xander and Hideki kind of 1A, 1B, just kind of separating them by ownership, and then Morikawa behind those 2. And you can make the same argument with Morikawa. Like if he gets forgotten in terms of ownership, then I think he's a fine tournament play as well. But I would prefer him, outside of ownership behind those 2 guys.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. You have the Ryder Cup narrative with Xander. We saw last week with Robert McIntyre coming off the Ryder Cup, picks up a win with the Alfred Dunhill Links. We had Terrell Hatton finish second. We've seen it so many times when you have these team events, if the guys play the week or 2 after, they seem to fare really well. Last time we saw Xander, he was smoking John Rahm in singles. So you got to think his confidence is pretty high. Kind of had a down 2025 year, but yeah, I think a win late in the year would really, boost his prospects looking into the 2026 season. So I do like Xander. You mentioned I do think he's going to be the most popular of the bunch. But all three of these guys have won in Asia. I think Hideki and Colin Morikawa both won the Zozo. Xander won his gold medal in Japan. He also won the WGC event in China 2018. My problem with Morikawa is he's got one top 10 since the Players. I mean, the dude's just been ice cold. Couldn't get anything going at the Ryder Cup. Still can't believe he can put him and Harris English out 2 days in a row. But we can save that for another show. So I'm kind of with you. I like Xander the best, but I do think he's going to be the most popular. Then I would lean Hideki and then Morikawa. Okay, let's get into the 9K range. Some interesting options here. I mean, Alex Noren's been on a tear. He's won twice in his last 3 starts. You have a couple other guys that just haven't teed it up in a while. Michael Kim won recently as well. So who are your favorite guys in the 9K range?
Yeah, I think unfortunately my favorite is Kurt Kitayama, and I say unfortunately because it looks like he's going to be maybe the most chalky player in the field right now. We actually have him projected as the top overall player in our projections at RotoGrinders, and I even did some looking around, some shifting around to some of the numbers for like Xander and Hideki, because again, when you're looking at some of the Vegas odds, obviously Xander is the favorite. I believe depending on the book that you look at, Hideki right behind him as the second in terms of Vegas odds. So I was a little bit surprised to see Kurt Kitayama popping so heavily in our model, but it's not like it's a huge gap, right? You have Kitayama as the 4th most likely to win this tournament on DraftKings odds. So Kurt Kitayama, I think, is worthy of being this popular. You can always make a case for wanting to have a game theory leverage play because there are several options in this range, but he would be my favorite when you're looking at some of his numbers over the last 6 months. He is number 1 in strokes gained off the tee, number 2 in strokes gained off the tee, number 1 in total strokes gained, and then number 2 in strokes gained on approach. So it all comes down to putting for Kitayama. If you can get that putter going, there's not many players in the field who can match his ball striking. So I like him quite a bit. I do like Goddard as well. His approach play has not been as good as some of these other guys in this range, but we've seen him get it done. We see him go on these tears frequently in terms of making birdies and going out there and competing in events. So Goddard's going to be probably my second favorite in this range, but Noren I think is a great shot as well. He's been on fire. He also has the 7th best par 4 birdie or better rate in the field. So if we're going to play that angle as well, all three of those guys make quite a bit of sense. I would rank them Kitayama, Goddard, and then Noren for me.
Yeah, Goddard's not a guy that I had on my radar early in the week, but you mentioned the par 4 scoring, second in the field over the last 12 months, second in the field over the last 6 months. He's really picked it up. He's played well in a lot of big events too. So I don't mind that in tournaments. I'm right there with you on Kitayama. He's second in my model this week. So the fact that he's first in RotoGrinders model, I like that quite a bit. Picked up a win a few months ago, and then he's played well since. So no issue with Kitayama in any format. Probably going to be off Michael Kim for large field stuff. I do think Rasmus Højgaard's interesting. Very hit or miss, but he's got a second, and a third in his last 5 starts. So a guy that's coming in pretty hot. And even though this is a PGA Tour event, it's in Japan. So guys that play a lot overseas seem to make more sense to me than the guys that just mainly play in the States, like Thor Bjornsson, Kevin Yu. Not that they can't come and play well here, but I think they're going to be out of their element a little bit more than the Norens, the Højgaards, guys that are used to playing over there. So yeah, I'm with you. I like Kitayama best, and then I would probably go Højgaard for large field stuff. And I think Siwoo Kim's a little interesting too. I just don't know what his upside is. He seems to be one of those safer guys that you play when there's a cut because he has such a high cut rate. But yeah, let's dip into the 8Ks unless you have anybody else in the 9s.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. We touched on my 3 favorites in that range, so I'm good to head to the 8s.
Okay, let's do it. At the very top, we have Max Homa, who's finally showing some signs of life. He's not going to be a guy that projects well, and he's probably not going to be very popular, but back-to-back top 20s, I'm a little bit interested. Might not be ready to go there yet, but once we get to the California swing in the spring, I think he's going to be interesting. And then you got a lot of guys that feel just overpriced to me. I don't know. My model doesn't like Minwoo, Higo, Wyndham Clark, Adam Scott. Like all these guys project as poor values for me. So is there anybody in the 8Ks that you feel like playing this week?
Yeah, I think the Max Homa play certainly is somewhat intriguing. I think for golf is a little bit different where you can sort of talk yourself into playing some guys who don't necessarily project all that great, because especially in these times of the year where you had like the 2-3 month layoff, and guys can go and get so much done with their swing and can really come back a new player for the new season. And not many people needed that more than Max Homa, a reset button. So hopefully he found that and he can get that clicking. That'd be nice to see. I do have some interest in Minwoo Lee. We know that he can certainly be a guy who can overpower golf courses with his distance. His iron play has actually been improved towards the end of the year. When you look at some of these strokes gain numbers of guys, when you're looking at just in the Asian region, Minwoo Lee is actually amongst the top in terms of total strokes gain. I think he's sixth or seventh. Yeah, seventh in terms of strokes gained in Asia. So Minwoo Lee is a guy I have some interest in as well. And then looking all the way down at the bottom of the 8K range, Max Grazerman's another guy that I like. I typically am always on Max Grazerman. He's just a guy who we've seen him compete. We haven't seen him necessarily pull away with a win yet, but he's been in the running a handful of times over the last year and a half or so, it seems. So kind of hoping that he breaks through for one eventually. So I would say Minwoo Lee and Grazerman are probably my two favorites in that range. But I think there's, Griot's down here. You can make a case for him. Obviously, Higo played well last week. I think he probably gets steamed a little bit in terms of ownership. So it's probably a spot where I would want to kind of zag when people are zigging on Garrick Higo. So probably prefer Minwoo Lee at the ownership discount if our ownership numbers are accurate there, where we have Higo for 15, Minwoo Lee for like 7%. So I would say Minwoo Lee is probably my favorite in this range, and then Grazerman down there at 8K are the two guys I'm highlighting the most in this range.
Yeah, I like it. Single entry stuff. I don't think I'm going to play anybody in the eights. I just am not getting there. I'd probably rather start in the tens and nines and then kind of dip down to the sevens, which is a pretty strong range. But for tournaments, I don't mind Bezuidenhout coming off a sixth place finish at Alfred Dunhill Links Championship. Very good wedge player and a guy that can make a ton of putts. So I like him. Don't mind your Grazerman call. I struggle with the guys like him and Harry Hall that just gain all their strokes with the short game, but he just does it every week. So don't mind him at 8K. We did get a question from Steven. Any thoughts on fading everyone at 9.4K and higher to get away from, the ownership? You're definitely going to be unique if you do that, but I do think you're giving up a lot of win equity. And the problem that I have is that I just don't love the 8Ks that much, and you're probably going to be rostering 3 or 4 of them if you do go that route. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it. I think there is so much ownership in that range to where you would be pretty much impossible to not have a pretty unique lineup. But also, I think you're taking a lot of upside guys out of the equation too. Like even if you're talking some of these guys who aren't amongst those more popular 9-4 guys like Siwoo and Goddard, would not surprise me if one of those guys win this term as well. I think it's very likely that the winner comes from that range. So I think if your goal is if it's like a 150 type line contest where you're doing it just to be unique, I think that's fine, but probably not something I'm going crazy with, just because like you mentioned the win equity that's in that group.
Okay, agreed. Let's go to the 7.5 to 7.9 range. A lot of good plays in here, a lot of good values in my model. Who are some of your favorites here?
Yeah, looking at a few guys in this range. Højgaard, I don't mind. Nikolai Højgaard, I know both Højgaards in this field, which will be cool to watch. But Højgaard's a guy that projects pretty well for me. When you're looking at some of the strokes gain numbers, he's 7th in terms of approach over the last 6 months. Top 15 off the tee. Obviously, we know that he can bomb it as well. So I think he kind of fits this course pretty well. You always need to sort of wonder what he's going to do with the short game, and some of his prox numbers are not the most ideal, but he's still a guy who I think can certainly round into form. So he's probably my favorite in this range. Don't mind Fishburne as well. Mark Hubbard is also a guy that was projecting well for us. So at 7.5, I think he is also going to be on the short list for me. Mark Hubbard.
Yeah, I like Hubbard quite a bit. Made 9 of his last 10 cuts. He's a guy that tends to be streaky, and he's playing well right now. So I like him at 7.5. You mentioned Fishburne, another guy that I really like. He was great last fall, and then he struggled in the spring, summer. Now he's starting to play well again. He's gained off the tee in 10 of his last 13, gained on approach in 8 of his last 11, gained around the green in 5 of his last 6. So he's kind of trending towards, top 10, top 5 finish. You mentioned Højgaard. He does feel cheap compared to his brother. $1,500 discount there. He hasn't been in as good a form. I'll go back to Rico Hoey. I mean, this guy was the chalk last week, and he's a top 5 ball striker in the field. He switched his putter to a long putter. It hasn't necessarily worked yet, but he can't get any worse than he was with the short putter. So 7,700 looks like we have him at 6 to 8% ownership. I think that's a steal for one of the better ball strikers in the field. And then maybe Matthew McCarty. He's one of those guys that kind of just does everything well. He can pop every once in a while. Has 2 top 10s in his last 3 starts. So I do think this is a strong range. I mean, just by my ratings, like these guys project so much better than most of the 8K guys. So I'll probably just take the discount, and then if I can get a lower owned Rico or Fishburne, something like that, I think that's the way I'll get different rather than playing the 8K guys. Let's move to the lower 7s. Anybody that really stands out to you? It's kind of a weak range for me.
Yeah, I'd say there's probably a couple names that I have some interest in if you're just playing that, I guess, the region angle. Nico Echeverria has played really well in Asia. He actually leads the field in total strokes gained in this region. He's only played 4 rounds. So again, it's like not amazing data to pull from, but if that's an angle that you wanted to play, you could do so with him. We know that he can certainly get it done ball striking wise, and he's had a lot of success putting over here in those 4 rounds as well. And then Eric Cole, I also don't mind. Same sort of angle. He's played 8 rounds in Asia. He's second in total strokes gained. I mean, for what it's worth, not many guys have played any more than like 10 to 12 rounds in this region anyway. So it's pretty much all limited data. But at least it's a small sample that actually is not as noisy because it's directly related to the actual region that they're playing. And so I don't mind pulling from that. But Eric Cole and Echeverria are probably the 2 guys that stand out the most to me in this range, but I do feel like there's a few guys below in that real cheap range that make a little bit more sense just due to the fact that the no cut event is kind of opens you up to some more volatility based on the birdie or better stuff.
Yeah, Nico won in Asia last year, so that's probably why he's popping in those metrics. Was a different course, but still, don't mind that one. William Mao's been playing really well. He's got some high-end finishes. Ended up withdrawing from last week's event, maybe just because he was getting ready for this event. But yeah, T38 the Wyndham, T7 at the 3M. He won the ISCO, so young player that I think could make some noise here at 7K. Hopefully he's going to be forgotten about. We have him at 2% ownership right now. Matty Schmid's one of the better birdie or better guys. He's 6th in the field over the last 12 months. Keith Mitchell, another birdie or better guy, but he's been struggling with his form. And I like Eric Cole play. Just always have a soft spot for him. Very good wedge player, very good putter. So if we do get a lot of those short par 4s, like I mentioned, I do think he's going to make some sense here. Now we get into the ugly range. Everyone below 7K, do you have anyone that you can play? I have one guy that I'm going to probably play in my main lineup, and then nobody else.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm, banging the table for these guys too much, but there's actually a few guys in this range that I like just because of the, the volatility aspect of, sure, they can kind of go out there and blow up any given round, but they have that birdie or better aspect to them. Semi Valimaki is certainly one of them. He's 6th in this field over the last 6 months in birdie or better percentage, and 6th also in eagle percentage. I think there'll be a few opportunities out there for that this week. So Valimaki, Kevin Roy, I have some interest in. He's 12th in birdie or better over the last 6 months. Danny Walker, he's actually tied at 12th with Kevin Roy. And then I guess the last name I'll give out, Alex Smalley here. Not necessarily the same sort of build as some of those other guys that I mentioned, but he can certainly get it done in a few different ways. So he's 15th in birdie or better percentage. And then the last guy I'll throw out there would be Pot Geeter, who's had some success in par 4 scoring, especially par 4 birdie or better rates. So Pot Geeter, I guess, would be the last name. So I think that's like 5 names. Again, I probably wouldn't go overboard with any of these guys, but I think it makes sense to, I guess, distribute some of the exposure throughout that group of guys under 7K, especially in the no-cut event.
Yeah, I do think we could see Kevin Roy get steamed this week. He's number 11 in the RG model, number 12 in my model, number 1 in par 4 scoring. So anybody that sees all the par 4s on the scorecard, they're going to go and look at the stats and sees number 1. So I do think he could get steamed, but he is my favorite play below 7. outside of that, man, it's tough for me. Smalley projects well, but he's been bad. Putnam, kind of the same thing. Taiga Semikawa, maybe Kita Nakajima, two guys that have a lot of experience in Asia, in Japan. But yeah, I don't feel great about anyone down here. It is interesting that Potgieter is that cheap. Like he's a guy that can win events. So don't mind looking at him in large field stuff. All right, that'll probably do it. Do you have anything else for the people?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think I guess before we head out, I wanted to get Satoshi Kodaira was popping in the RG model quite a bit before we went live. And do you have any thoughts on him? He's actually grading. I mean, he's dead 6K. So maybe that's just why he was popping as a point per dollar play. Does your model have anything on him? Or I guess maybe we can live on air find a manual edit for me to make on one of these guys for this week.
Yeah, so I don't pull in any Asian Tour data into my model, so he doesn't project that well for me. But I was just looking at his results on official World Golf Rankings. So he's got a 4th T4 and a win in his last 7 starts, both on the Japan Golf Tour. So playing pretty well, min priced. You could certainly do worse.
Yeah, okay, I'll take it. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, that will do it for the Drive for Show DFS for Dough. Appreciate you guys joining us early on a Tuesday. Good luck this week, and we'll catch you back here whenever the next event is. Hopefully next week. See you guys.